Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the College Football Playoff Preview, hosted by me, Austin Mock. You can find all of my work over at The Athletic, as well as my social media, AMock419, YouTube, Twitter, X, anything. That's where you'll find me. And this week, pretty big week. Following up what was a kind of shocking week. If you head over to my page at The Athletic, if you're watching, you can see we can scroll to this is before uh, week 5, 2 weeks ago. This is before last week. And as we saw, Texas was the first team on the bubble, and Penn State was in there at this as the sixth seed. A little bit of a change up with two upsets going down. They're both off of the bubble as it stands right now, with just two tough losses. I mean, Florida's was a little better. Penn State's coming out of nowhere, but didn't think there'd be a lot of shakeup. But as you can see, we have everybody moving except for Tulane in the group of 5 spot at the 12 seed, and Ohio State and Ole Miss at the 1 and 4 seed. So turn into this week. Like I said, you can go through each week what my bracket has over at the Athletic. Pretty big weekend. Ohio State, Illinois, Alabama, Missouri, and Indiana, Oregon kind of highlight it in my mind. But you still go down the list. Oklahoma, Texas, Michigan, USC is a sneaky big game that people might not be paying attention to as much. Some Big 12 drama we're going to have this week with BYU and Arizona, Arizona State, Utah. Georgia has to go on the road to Auburn. LSU hosts South Carolina. That's another big one. Kansas, Texas Tech could be fun in the Big 12. Florida, can they have that momentum from last week? Can they parlay that into a win at Texas A&M? So a lot of fun games. Let's get into kind of where we are as things go right now. Ohio State's your number one. I don't think that's too shocking for anyone who's been following the sport. I think there is some concern. The offense isn't quite what people would expect it to be. But Texas has a pretty good defense. Offense didn't look great in that game, though there were some early drops. And traveling to Washington stuff. But to Illinois, I'm not a huge fan of Illinois. The fact that they were ranked 9th early in the year is just mind blowing to me. I don't know what we're doing from a ranking perspective. Ohio State's a 2-touchdown favorite in this game. They should go with ease. 98% to make the playoff right now. I don't have it in front of me. I think I ran the simulations. If they lose, they only drop to like 94% or something like that. So there is no such thing as a lock, but Ohio State's pretty dang close. So moving down, Miami, they are off this week. Take care of Florida State, kind of make that game interesting at the end. But yeah, Miami, similar again, 98% for the Hurricanes to make the playoff. I'm not a huge Mario Cristobal fan, and I think there is some cause for concern. They've been showing I think it's his November record at Miami. It's been pretty poor, but the schedule is just no one is even close to the talent level. Definitely in the trenches, they're super strong in the trenches. There's not many teams I think in the country that are better set up in the trenches. Home against Louisville next weekend, home against Stanford, at SMU, home against Syracuse, home against NC State, at Virginia Tech, at Pitt. That's a lot of wins. So 2 losses. I think Miami's in some trouble. They're still going to be in the ACC hunt, I assume. But yeah, I think Miami's again not going to say a lock, but 98% to make the playoff per my numbers. It would take a monumental collapse for them to not make it. 3 seed is Oregon. Huge game, 94% to make the playoff. Against Indiana today, Oregon's more than a touchdown favorite. I think there's an argument for that game to be double digits. If Oregon wins this game today, I don't know where the other loss. A lot depends on USC, but they go to Rutgers. They go home against Wisconsin. At Iowa could be tough just because you're traveling. The travel is tough. Home against Minnesota, I think that's an easy win. Home against USC is a tough one. At Washington can get a little dicey as well. So there's 2 games at the end of the year that kind of can make this a little dicey for the Ducks. But beat Indiana today, I'd be pretty shocked if they lose two, and you're um, probably seeing yourself make the Big Ten championship. So your odds of making the playoff are still going to be very high, even if the game against Indiana today doesn't go their way. So Ducks 94%. Those are the big three right now, that my model thinks is pretty set up, to make the playoff. The other bye, as if we scroll up here, Ole Miss is at 4. I've said it a couple times before. If you've listened to the past episodes, Ole Miss's schedule for being in the pack or the SEC is super manageable the rest of the way. Home against Washington State today. That should be an easy win. Now they do have to go to Georgia, to Oklahoma. It looks like John Mateers is going to be good to go for that game as well. So they're going to have to face Oklahoma at their toughest, at their best. But then home against South Carolina, home against the Citadel, home against Florida. Maybe that game gets tough, but again, these games are at home. And then at Mississippi State, anything can happen in the Egg Bowl, but that's pretty favorable. That's why you're seeing them down here at 78% to make the playoff. They are the bye. They are the highest rated SEC team, to make the playoff per my projections. Winning games. I'll say it over and over again. Winning games is what gets you into the playoffs, and Ole Miss is doing that. They have not dropped any. If we look at FanDuel, I'm a little bit higher on Ole Miss. FanDuel's at minus 178 to make the playoff. They have Alabama higher than them. I think Georgia's slightly below them, but that's it. That's the only team that is higher than Ole Miss, to make the playoff here. So, I apologize. Texas A&M is there. So, yeah, that's I don't see Texas A&M has a favorable schedule. I don't think it's as high as what Ole Miss is, but that's why they're there. Texas A&M is my 6th seed, so I'm not going to sit here and complain too much about that. Going to the quarterfinals, first round. No bye for these teams. Home game. Texas Tech is my number 5 seed. Going off with Tulane. Tulane, we saw the big game between South Florida and North Texas last night. Tulane's still, in my mind, in my model's mind, the team to beat out of the group of 5. Texas Tech is the 5 seed. I have them here 71% to make the playoff. FanDuel, for anybody who thinks I'm a little high on them, has them implied around the mid 60s. I've talked about this in previous ones. I probably have a little bit of a Big 12 bias because there's a chance that the committee changes how they seed their teams in their playoff rankings. There's been a little bit of chatter that they're gonna have higher, more impact on strength of schedule this year. We'll see how that goes, but until we see that, it's hard for me to gauge too much. But yeah, I think Texas A&M or Texas Tech, sorry, edges out fellow Texas team here, Texas A&M for the 5 seed and the game against the group of 5. Rest of the schedule for Texas Tech, you got Kansas today. They got to go to Arizona State, see what happens with the Levitt injury. Home against Oklahoma State, at Kansas State, home against BYU, home against UCF, and at West Virginia. That's super manageable. I think there's a pretty good chance, and you can see it there. They win the conference about 50% of the time. I think but they make the playoff at 71. I think there's a pretty good chance that they can make it as an at-large, because there's a very good chance that they run the table in the regular season, lose in the Big 12 championship, and I don't think they're going to fall out of the playoff. They're ranked 9th right now. If they go undefeated, they're going to be ranked near the top 5. They're not going to drop the whole way out of the playoff with a loss in the Big 12 championship game. So Texas Tech has set themselves up for a pretty good run at an at-large bid. Texas A&M, next team on the list. Again, another team that just is finding ways to win football games. I mentioned off the top, game against Florida today. We'll see if Florida can keep that momentum rolling and take down 2 teams in the state of Texas in back-to-back weeks. Problem is, this one's at Texas A&M, and I just think Texas A&M is a better football team than Texas right now. 68% to make the playoff. The thing that's interesting to me about A&M is they have this stretch here after this game in Florida. They got to go to Arkansas, which is not going to be tough, to LSU, then they have a bye, and then to Missouri. They do not play at home again until November 15th. And two of those three opponents are pretty tough. There is a bye in between those, so they will go home, but they don't play at home during that stretch. That to me is a tough stretch going on the road in those games. And then they have to end the year at Texas. I know Texas doesn't look great right now, but going on the road rivalry game at Texas, that is not going to be an easy game for Texas A&M. That is why ultimately they're not where Ole Miss is. Ole Miss's schedule is much more favorable because you got to throw in a game at home against South Carolina in there as well. So that's why you're seeing a little bit of a difference, the 10% difference between Ole Miss and Texas A&M. But Texas A&M is your 6th seed right now. And Oklahoma has found themselves into the bracket this week, down here at 40% to make the playoff. That number's probably going to go up obviously they win today against Texas. That number will go up, but I do have a injury adjustment for John Mateer. He's probable for today. We'll see how that looks and just how efficient he is, because of how much they rely on him to get it done. But I think that defense-wise, Oklahoma is fantastic. I think that's enough, even if Texas was if Mateer was not playing, I think you had an argument that Oklahoma could still beat Texas because of how good the defense is and how that matches up with Texas's offense. So big game for them. If they win, obviously it's going to be looking great. If Mateer looks good, they're going to be back up. They'll have an argument to get into the playoff as a bye, I should say. A lot's going to come down to if they can win the SEC. But schedule's not easy. Their schedule's brutal. This is why they're so low. Texas today, they got to go to South Carolina next week. Home against Ole Miss in 2 weeks. Then they got to go to Tennessee. Then they have a bye week. To Bama. Home against Missouri. Home against LSU. That is absolutely brutal for a team that's already, they've played Michigan, they've played Auburn. Not going to sit here and say that that's the toughest schedule in college football so far this year, but in terms of remaining schedule, the toughest schedule goes to Oklahoma. The second toughest goes to Texas A&M. Next playoff, we're team Missouri is at 8, Alabama's at 9. And then you got to go down a little bit. I'd say LSU at 16, and then Ole Miss at 20. That's the difference here. You're talking a pretty big gap between what Ole Miss is facing in an SEC schedule versus what Oklahoma is facing, and even Texas A&M. So these two teams are the 6-11 matchup here. Texas A&M, Oklahoma, the two toughest remaining schedules remaining per my model. So yeah, we'll see. We could have some big swings today, and if both of those teams against Florida, Texas A&M against Florida, Oklahoma against Texas, we're going to see some switching up in this bracket before I do next week's article. 7 seed Notre Dame or video against Indiana right now, rematch of last year's first round playoff. Notre Dame, I've said it for a while now. They are going to benefit from the fact that they're going to be able to win football games. They have the 69th hardest remaining schedule. Just for comparison, Indiana has the 34th hardest. I know everybody wanted to rag on Notre Dame after their early season losses to Miami and Texas A&M, but those are two teams that are ranked, inside my top 6. Those games were also lost by a combined 4 points. So you get a decent win against Boise. You look at the rest of the schedule. Home against NC State today. Home against USC. That is the tricky game. That is next weekend. USC is a tough spot against Michigan today. Is there a look ahead to that? I don't know. I doubt it. But always going to be a tough game. They got to go to Boston College. They got Navy at home. They got to go to Pitt. Maybe Pitt's offense, with freshman quarterback is going to make a jump here. Home against Syracuse, at Stanford. There are a ton of wins on this schedule. If they lose, they're out. I think that's probably I'm pretty confident in that. The only reason that I can say that they won't is just if absolute chaos happens and they tend to have Miami and Texas A&M as their losses, so maybe they get a benefit there. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's one of those things where Notre Dame win and you're in, or else they're going to be going home pretty quickly. Indiana, on the other hand, I don't think I don't know what to make of Indiana, man. They got to go to Oregon today. Obviously, one of the an undefeated team is going to have a loss here, but to Oregon, home against Michigan State, home against UCLA. Maybe UCLA is better now under new offense coordinator. After upsetting Penn State last week at Maryland, I don't think is an easy game. At Penn State's not going to be an easy game. Wisconsin at home, and then at Purdue. Again, a lot of wins. If you scroll down here, Notre Dame and Indiana here, I have their most likely record at 10-2. That's just again, they're going to have two losses there. 51% to make the playoff. Notre Dame's at 65. In with this matchup, I'm a little bit high on Notre Dame. I think that goes back into this scheduling conversation. I think Notre Dame can run into an issue with scheduling if they want, but I see their losses as going to be able to their playoff ranking will be overcome because of how good their losses are if they continue to win. Indiana, I have them at 51%. Our friends at FanDuel have it at much higher than that. They're at almost they're sitting in like the low 60s. So these two are a little bit closer than I have in the betting market, which I find interesting. But both teams are good. I don't know. Again, my worry with Indiana is can they, similar to last year, can they play with the big boys? And we'll see that today if they go. But it's a tough schedule. Got to go the whole way to Oregon. We might only see it in their game against Penn State too, which is again a road environment at Penn State. They can't same thing as last year. They can't get any of these big boys at Indiana. I'd be interested to see how that goes. Maybe we'll be fortunate in future years, but both of these teams I think are in very good shape to make the playoff because of their schedules. Notre Dame, I'm probably high on them. I would admit. I think they have a higher outlook than people want it to be. Want to admit, but I don't know if it's quite this high. I think the 7th seed and getting a home game might be a little ambitious per my model. Indiana, on the other hand, they can lose the games that they're underdogs in to Penn State and Oregon and win the rest. And I know people don't like it, but 10-2 is making the playoff. Same as Notre Dame, 10-2. Same as two teams I talked about, Penn State and Texas. 10-2, you're in the playoff. I don't think that's much of a hot take at this point. 8-9 game, Georgia and Alabama. For people that are going to complain about Georgia being higher than Alabama, I do still have them a little bit. The difference here, as you can see on the screen, 59 and 53%. Betting market's much higher in Alabama than I am. We're talking like 70% to make the playoff. Georgia is sitting at like low 60s. So I think Alabama is a little bit overrated in the market right now. One, they already have a loss. So does Georgia. I know that. And that's already that is to Alabama at Georgia. So Alabama is going to have that head-to-head. They're going to be able to bump above them. The issue that I have with Alabama is they got to go to Missouri today, where they're a field goal favorite. They got Tennessee at home. They got to go to South Carolina. They got LSU at home. They got Oklahoma with John Mateer at home. And they got to go to Auburn. There's probably another loss in there. If you told me there's 2 losses, I'd believe you. I think Alabama has the best chance to get in as a 3-loss team, similar to last year, and maybe their fortune will be better. And this is where I think I can confidently say, when I mentioned earlier about the Big 12 or the schedules changing for the committee this year, I think Alabama is probably the team that would benefit the most. So you can see like maybe some Big 12 or Notre Dame come down in their playoff odds per my model, whereas Alabama would shoot up. But as it stands right now, Alabama's the 9th seed. Comparing them to Georgia, though, I mentioned that schedule. Georgia's got to go to Auburn, home against Ole Miss, home against Florida, that's neutral, at Mississippi State, home against Texas, home against Charlotte, home against Georgia Tech. I'm not saying that's an easy schedule, but per my numbers, Alabama has the hardest remaining schedule. Georgia's is 24th. So a pretty big difference there. That's why Georgia's getting the bump here. If they do end up with the same record, I do believe that Alabama is going to get the head-to-head nod. That's just not how I'm doing But with the 6%, that's not how I'm doing the 6% difference in their playoff odds. That's not quite how we're that's not they're not getting the benefit of that head to head. Recapping the bracket: Ohio State, Miami, Oregon, Ole Miss are your top 4 seeds. I don't think there's too much of an argument there. Texas Tech being at 5 is maybe a little bit. I can understand if people want to argue that one a little bit. Texas A&M's your 6 seed, Notre Dame your 7 seed, Georgia your 8 seed, Alabama your 9 seed, Indiana at 10, Oklahoma at 11, and Tulane at 12. So that's the bracket. If we scroll down past the teams, we got these bubble teams here: Tennessee, Michigan, Missouri, Georgia Tech, LSU. Starting with Tennessee, I don't know what to make of Tennessee, to be honest with you. I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion on if they're a good football team or not. But they got an easy one, should be an easy one against Arkansas today, at Alabama, at Kentucky, home against Oklahoma, home against New Mexico State, at Florida, home against Vanderbilt. That schedule isn't too bad. It puts them in 23rd, so they're it's manageable. Again, they blew that game against Georgia. That's huge. If they don't lose that game to Georgia, they're firmly in the playoff right now. They're right now the first team on the bubble. Michigan is probably the most interesting team. They got to go to USC today. Very tough game, just going across to the West Coast. I think USC is a solid football team. USC is favored by about a field goal in this game. That is not surprising to me. But if Michigan is to win, they got Washington at home next week for a 12 Eastern start. So Washington, body clock 9 a.m. for Washington. They got to go to Michigan State. They have Purdue at home. They got to go to Northwestern. I believe that game is being played at Wrigley, so that'll basically be a home game for Michigan. They will have more fans there. To Maryland before Ohio State. The Maryland game, the game before Ohio State always gets a little tricky. But the thing that's really big for Michigan is if they beat USC today, they have a very good shot of going into the Ohio State game undefeated in the Big Ten. So they're going to have a pretty good shot at making the Big Ten championship regardless. So are they there? I don't know. Still not a huge believer in their offensive line. True freshman quarterback, obviously Bryce Underwood, very talented. We'll see where he progresses. But yeah, I think the biggest issue for me is offensive line and lack of top end talent on the defense. I think their defense is talented. I don't think they have the stars that you need to make a run like that. So they're sitting at 34%, Tennessee at 37. They're the next teams. I said Michigan's the second team on the bubble. Tennessee is an easy one. Michigan, big game. They win today. They're going to probably shoot up. I think I had it at like 50%. Missouri is going to be in the same boat here. They play Alabama at home today. They are going to shoot up to that 50%-ish number if they beat Alabama. They get the twofold of Alabama being a current playoff team, and obviously it's someone's got to take over the percentages of Alabama making the playoff now that they lost. So after Bama for Missouri is at Auburn, at Vanderbilt. Don't love that stretch. Home against Texas A&M, home against Mississippi State, at Oklahoma, and at Arkansas. That's my worry with Missouri is can they do it? They've not really played anybody to this point. Games against Kansas and South Carolina were close. Both of those games were at home. Have to also bring up their first road game will be at Auburn next week. They have not played anywhere else yet. So first true road game is at Auburn. 4 of their last 6 are on the road, so that's why they're not as high. Georgia Tech, again, they're on the bubble. Back to the schedule conversation that if we overrate them, because I don't think they'll have the schedule. Their win against Clemson looked great at the time. Now it's not anything really. They got Virginia Tech today, at Duke, home against Syracuse, at NC State, at Boston College, home against Pitt. I think they probably need to be 11-1 with a win over Georgia to be firmly into the conversation. SMU was almost out of the conversation last year, right? And if we're going to assume that there's some changes to the playoff committees and how they handle strength of schedule, I think Georgia Tech is gonna need that Georgia win. 55th hardest remaining schedule. They played the 76th hardest schedule so far this year. So that's just how I kind of see it for them. LSU is an interesting one. They're only 4-1. I have them down to 21% though. I don't know what to make of this LSU team, but again, we go back to these SEC schedules are difficult. They have the 16th hardest remaining schedule. They've played the 5th hardest so far. They've lost with the Clemson win. The Florida win might be gaining some, but obviously they lost at Ole Miss. They got to play South Carolina today at home. They got to go to Vanderbilt. Then they got to play Texas A&M at home. They have a bye week before they go to Alabama. Then they're home against Arkansas and Western Kentucky. Then they got to go to Oklahoma to end the year. So I don't know. It's a tough that's a tough schedule for me to have faith in them, and I don't think they're the top end 9-3 team. I think Alabama's going to have that. I think Alabama's a good shot at that. I should say. I don't think Alabama will have the. I think Alabama will have the tougher schedule. It's going to be close, but I don't know if LSU with Clemson not being what they are, that's going to hurt LSU's chances of getting into the playoff there. So, yeah, that's the roundup for today. Just went through it. That's my thoughts on everything. Like I said, we have some pretty big football games today. Ohio State, Illinois could be sneaky good. I think Ohio State takes care of business pretty easily there. Alabama, Missouri is going to shake things up one way or another. Indiana, Oregon is going to shake things up one way or another. Oklahoma, Texas is going to shake things up. And more shake things up. Even if Texas loses, Oklahoma, you think, well, but if John Mateer looks good, they're gonna get that injury adjustment taken off of them in my model. So that's gonna move some things around. Florida, Texas A&M. See if Florida can still be a playoff wrecker with for the second week in a row. Kansas, Texas Tech. Big 12 is always going to have interesting games because I don't know if they have two at-larges in them. Georgia has to go on the road at Auburn. Michigan has to go on the road to USC. South Carolina, LSU. And then two later games, BYU, Arizona, and Arizona State, Utah, with some Big 12 playoff implications. So that is it for me this week. If you enjoy the content, hit the subscribe button, hit the like, please. I appreciate it. As always, you can find all my stuff over at The Athletic. You can reach out to me with any questions you have or anything at all if you just want to talk football, sports, whatever, on social, AMOC419. But yeah, if you could, please like and subscribe the video. And yeah, until next time, we will let's do it again next week with another bracket that's going to be flipped on its head with another crazy week of college football. That's all for me, folks. I'll talk to you next week. Enjoy your weekend of college football and NFL. Until next time.